welcome to this live stream. Sorry for the delay. My technical abilities need to be a bit worked on. My name is Gerhard Kling. I'm a professor of finance at the University of Aberdeen. I will briefly talk about financial crime and cybersecurity and the power of data. Now, this is a non-technical live stream, and I will move between different applications, so I don't always watch the chat function. So if you have any questions, just leave a comment in here, and I will get back into it. Yeah. So now I just go back into the chat. So I hope it's all up and running. And if you have any problems, just let me know. And fingers crossed, we manage this live stream. Yeah. So that's the first time we had this issue. Now, in terms of my own background, you can easily find me online. You just Google my name. I have a background in economics and in mathematics. I work mostly on corporate finance topics. Also, I worked in consulting. I worked for some time full-time for McKinsey in corporate finance and banking. And then I moved to some part-time work in consulting. And I have been doing some consulting work now for many years, mostly around data science type of projects. So I work a lot on data, on programming, and issues related to security and financial crime. Now, of course, you can ask yourself, does it really matter for you? Financial crime is usually associated, to be honest, with older people. Yeah, so when you look at crime statistics, most of the victims are older people. So actually, you can ask yourself, you as a young person, are you someone at risk when it comes to these cyber attacks? And the answer is sadly, yes, you are. You are definitely at risk because we have lots of cases where also students were targeted by cyber criminals. And I will come to this. So the main point I want to make is I want to give you a very brief overview regarding cybercrime in the UK. Then I ask the question, does it actually matter? Does it affect you? And finally, what can you do about it? I think that's the most critical issue. And again, if you have any questions at any point, just use the live chat. So hopefully that's working. And I will get back to you if I see anything popping up there. But I won't be able always to monitor that. So fingers crossed, it's all now working fine. Good. Now, when it comes to cybercrime, the issue here is who actually defines what is cybercrime. Now, the answer is, well, the Home Office does. So the Home Office publishes so-called counting rules, which basically define how crime is recorded. The main problem quite often is to distinguish between fraud and also financial fraud and cybercrime. Quite often they can be interrelated. So it's not easy to actually properly record crimes and then also to get the data about cyber attacks. Now, based on the counting rules, these are the different types of crimes that would be classified under cybercrime. There are quite a few elements here which I think most likely you came across just by just checking media. So the obvious things are hacking a personal computer or hacking into social media or email accounts. Now, this is actually quite common. In fact, social media account hacking is the most common form of cyber attacks. Hacking with the combined intent of extortion is a little bit less common, but again, there are quite a few cases. And then there are so-called denial of service attacks. Now, these attacks are actually rather common, where cyber criminals try to push a service out of use simply by bombarding a website with requests. And this is quite effective in shutting down even large services. Now, for instance, Google Cloud was attacked in 2017, but also Amazon Web Services in 2020. So even large companies do suffer such attacks. In terms of what's the scale of the loss, apparently based on the statistics, and one has to be very careful, to be honest, it's about £9.6 million a year. Now, if you ask me honestly, do I trust the statistics? My honest answer is not quite, because I think it's most likely underreported. But in total, we have about 30,000 reported cases. However, when you look more carefully into the literature, you find that a significant number, about a third of internet users, so here we talk about millions of people, experience a sort of cyber attack. Now, of course, that's not always reported, and quite often the main issue is actually, do you know that you are attacked? In fact, that's an important limitation one has to have in mind. Very frequently, people don't know that a password was stolen or an account was compromised. So I would be very careful in trusting these numbers, to be honest, because there's significant underreporting going on. In particular, companies are very reluctant to accept that they have been compromised because the reputational damage is quite severe. So it is actually very common that companies try to avoid, being out there in the public domain talking about a security breach. So there is a lot of talk going on about companies paying off cyber criminals and not necessarily reporting every attack. Certainly, the 10 million reported is, in my view, a very, very low figure and does not actually really account for the scale of the problem. So I think that's an important message to take home. So what I want you to do is I want you to check, in fact, whether your own mobile phone or emails or passwords have been hacked. And there are a few useful websites. You get actually all of that if you want access to this in my GitHub. So on my GitHub, you have here a section on live streams. You have all the links on the YouTube channel, and in live stream 2, you have the document I'm showing, which has all the links to various websites. So if you want to have access to that, it's all available, as always, totally for free. So if there's any question, let me know. Hopefully it's all otherwise streaming all right in terms of quality. Good. Now, in terms of these web services, what you simply do is you put in your email or phone number and you check whether it has been pawned. So basically, has it been owned, or put differently, has it been hacked? And I just put in some of my email addresses. Some of them, in fact, have been compromised. Now, this is an old account. I worked at SOAS before, and we can just check now, has it been attacked? And the answer is yes. I actually didn't know about this. I just checked it because the account is out of use for more than 3 years, so it doesn't really affect me. But sometimes when you also move jobs, an account might still be active, and this account was compromised. And now below you see actually what happened. Apparently an online publisher was affected by a cyber attack, and email addresses were revealed, including also sometimes, in this case, not also IP addresses. You see that, so email messages and IP addresses. Now that is actually quite tricky, because once a cyber security breach happens and people have access to your email address and your IP address, you can do quite a fair amount of damage. Once I know your IP address, I can start scanning your home network for potential vulnerabilities, and I could potentially attack a person. Even if you don't do this, what you could do as a criminal is you can simply send a friendly email to someone and tell someone, oh, I know your IP address. Or in this breach, I know even some passwords. And use that for extortion, which again is a very, very common attack. So have a look, check your own email addresses, and you might be surprised they might be compromised. Similar with passwords, be very careful. Yeah, just again, that's the other link. You can check your passwords. If you use very common passwords like password 123 or anything silly, it will be definitely available in various online databases. Yeah, so that's an unsafe password. So it's always a good idea to check out passwords and make sure the ones you use are not already part of a database. Because usually when you try to attack a target, what you do is you look at these common passwords and you simply do a so-called brute force attack, where you try each and every password on various lists and see whether you can actually enter. Now, so that's an indication that password 123 is a bad one, obviously. Yeah. So have a look and check it for yourself and make sure you use better passwords that are certainly not already out in the open. So when we do security checks, also when you work for clients, you definitely would like to add some further searches to this. In particular, what we do is we also do some so-called dark web searches. Because in many cases, if there is a security breach, this hacker tries most likely to sell your data on the dark web. And you might be able to figure out what was stolen and what the damage is. So that is quite often a very useful search strategy. Good, I just check quickly the chat. Are there any questions at this point? All good? Yeah, just try this out yourself. You might be surprised how exposed you already are. The other thing which I recommend, again, I of course don't have any sponsorships. So anything I recommend here is entirely because of me using it or having a good experience with it. There are various password managers available. Now the idea of a password manager is that this manager manages all your passwords. Because ideally, you would use different passwords for each and every separate account of yours. Yeah, so for your email, for your Facebook, whatever you have, you would use separate passwords. The trouble is most people use the same password. Yeah, because you don't want to forget it yourself. So it's much easier to use the same or a similar password for all your accounts. But of course, that's very stupid in terms of security, okay? So a password manager basically manages all your passwords for you. And it would generate passwords which are more or less impossible to guess. Of course, nothing is 100%, but it makes it a lot harder and a lot safer. So that's, I think, useful in particular for people that have lots of accounts. And honestly, if you think about it, how many accounts do you have? Most likely you have maybe 2-3 email accounts. When you have a Facebook, you have maybe other social media, whatever, yeah, and maybe a TikTok and so on. So all of this, of course, means you have more passwords to remember, which make it quite tricky. So have a look. I think it's not a bad idea. If you don't want to use a password manager, at least think about your passwords and use difficult ones. What actually works quite well is to take two words like dog and house, which are not related, and just throw them together. Yeah, so that is not a massively bad idea. Yeah, it's better than many other passwords. So I think that's an important point to note. So make sure your emails are safe, your mobile phone is safe, and your passwords are secure. Good. Okay. Now the thing is, if you go online, the next element, of course, is what do people know about you, basically, and what is the risk you have. Now, we already mentioned the IP address. So the IP address is able to identify you on a network. So for a standard attack, if I want to target a particular computer, I need the IP address. Yeah, so there's quite a bit of interest to get IP addresses. The trouble is, it's very easy to get access to an IP address, yeah, because wherever you go, you always leave a trace behind. And lots of websites will store your IP address. And a hacker could sniff that out, basically, and can have access to your IP address. So what you can do as well is you can check your own IP address by following this link. I won't do it right now because I'm working on a university computer, so I'm on a university network. So I don't want to show, of course, the IP address to the wider community. This is a very stupid idea. You can also do something more. You can test for vulnerabilities. Basically, you can test your own home network just by putting in your IP address, which you obtain from the first website. Again, I can't demonstrate it right now because I don't want to attack the university network. Well, it's not an attack. It's basically a so-called Nmap scan. But still, if you have a high level of security, most likely this would be flagged up by your IT department. Yeah, so you only do this if you own and control your home network. Yeah, so and make sure that you have, of course, permission to do so. I don't condone doing these things without permission. So the idea is you can simply test yourself whether you can be attacked. And in fact, when you do work for companies, this is an important part of the job in cybersecurity, that you go out there and you literally try to attack them. And by doing so, you will figure out whether there are any vulnerabilities which are not really yet detected. And that's a good strategy. So quite often attacking someone, attacking your own client or attacking yourself is a good strategy to identify weaknesses in your defense. So this is quite a process we tend to go through when we work on cybersecurity assignments. Good. Any questions about this? Okay. Now, the other area, which unfortunately is a significant problem in the UK, is identity theft. Now, identity theft is sadly very common. The main reason is because we don't have a good registration system in this country. We don't have photo IDs for everything. And usually the proofs you require, the proof of address and so on, they are quite easy to fake. Yeah, so that makes it quite straightforward to exploit these limited ways to check someone's identity. There is only one good defense, and this is simply to check credit reports on a regular basis. Of course, at the moment, as a young person, it doesn't have to bother you, but quite soon, when you move to university, think about having credit cards, think about maybe also opening some further, maybe savings accounts or whatever, or apply for a loan, then these things do matter a lot. If you want to have a free access to credit reports, I recommend ClearScore. Again, I'm not sponsored. They are good and they are entirely for free. And they also offer some dark web searches about, again, your email and your passwords to make sure that nothing is leaked in these domains. Good. The next thing I want to talk about is the risk you face. In particular, if you are more a younger person, so to speak, and you might be recruited without you knowing by criminals to act as a money mule. So what that means is that people send you money and they tell you to send money to someone else. In this process, basically what they tend to do is they tend to simply use you to launder money. Because once you send money to an organization, this money is clean, and they might send you money which was obtained by illegal means. Now, this is a big concern, and there have been many, many cases in the UK where young people were targeted and they act then as money mules without them knowing. And honestly, very often it's not very straightforward to figure out that this is actually happening. Yeah, so very often young people are targeted by these organizations, and they might offer a job, or then they might say, oh, can you sell some products for us, or can you handle some deliveries? So it might be quite, not very suspicious. So for instance, what happens quite often is that people say, oh, we pay you £1,000 a month. And they phone you up and all of a sudden say, oh, I'm sorry, we send you too much money. Our mistake, we send you 10,000. Can you send 9,000 back to us? Now, that's already money laundering. Yeah, and well, you might think, oh, it's just an honest mistake. I just sent, of course, the money back. But this could be potentially money laundering. And you might not know about it. Yeah. So these cases actually exist, and there have been quite a few prosecutions as well. It's important, really important for you to watch out, be careful whenever you see offers of remote working or where the compensation seems a little bit too good to be true. It's also very tricky, in particular when it comes to selling and buying electronic products, yeah, because there it's kind of can be very subtle. You might not notice that by doing that you actually conduct money laundering. So this is, in my opinion, the number one risk factor for young people. So without you knowing, being recruited by criminals to launder money, and it might look completely harmless, but actually your transactions facilitate money laundering. And there have been, as I mentioned, prosecutions in the UK. I just wait here for a second. Good. Are there any questions? Okay, good. Okay, so now in terms of what you can do about it, in this case is simply to be very vigilant. So anything you notice in terms of people approaching you for some remote work, always be very vigilant and have in mind that people might use it for a very different purpose. The next thing I want to try is to check whether you can be identified online. So this is another element where you have to think carefully about security issues. And again, many people don't know much about it. Yeah, so that's something I would always recommend you test out yourself. You find the link to this website, Cover Your Tracks, in the document which is on GitHub. And you can test your own browser whether you can be identified, whether you can be tracked. You can try different browsers, but you might be surprised that actually it usually doesn't do much. Yeah, it doesn't really help much. So when you go to this website, you just press test your browser and you see whether you can be identified. That might take a few minutes. Let's just see how secure am I online. You can try this also with private browsing as well. It again won't help, honestly speaking. And you can try Firefox, different types of browsers. Yeah. So well, the outcome here is you are not protected against tracking on the web, and also your browser has a unique fingerprint. So that's the other thing which is important to note. So put differently, it's possible for someone to identify who you are online. Yeah? This is the common outcome. So when you test this, in almost all the cases, this is what happens. Yeah? So usually you can't really protect yourself in this way. So in this case, for instance, we know that my fingerprint is unique among more than 200,000 tested connections. So that means I'm uniquely identified. And when you go further down, you see actually all the things people know about you. Yes, they know about your operating system, they know about your font and your font size, and your time zone, and so on and so on. They know an awful lot. Yeah, and of course that's quite a problem in these cases. Yeah, so that's quite a problem. They know your language setup, the platforms you use, and so on and so on. And all of that can be used to basically figure out who you are. Yeah, you don't need that many data points to be able to identify someone uniquely. Now, that's a very common issue. Do people know about this much? I'm not entirely sure they actually do. And in fact, there is a lot of discussion about whether people should be allowed to use social media accounts without their real names, for instance, to use fake names and stuff like that. But to be honest, it doesn't matter because you can be identified. Yeah, so if you use a normal setup, a normal browser, a normal operating system, you can be identified. It doesn't matter. You can call yourself what you want online, but you can be identified. You can go even one step further. Whenever you use social media and you start typing a message, you just need about 500 characters to be uniquely identified, just by the way you type. Yeah, because everyone types a bit differently. You have a different speed of typing. You make certain common mistakes and so on. You can be identified just by typing messages on a social media platform, for instance. So these are the main issues you have to be aware of. Yeah, so there is always an element here where you can be most likely identified. Good. Are there any questions, any issues around that? Yeah, any questions? So that's a challenge. You have to think very carefully that, as a matter of fact, anything you do online, you could be potentially monitored, and that's just a matter of fact. So just using, not your real name on a social media platform doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it doesn't make you really safe or whatever. Certainly not. Good. So quite often when I have these discussions also with students, the first and most obvious thing is to say, what about VPNs in this case? Yeah, does it make sense to use a virtual private network? Does this actually make you safe? And the answer is, well, it depends what you mean by it. Yeah, so a VPN, what it does is it gives you a different IP address. Yeah, so that's the main difference, and you can change your location. Now, this might be useful, for instance, if you want to use a service which is not available in your country. Yeah, so there are reasons why a VPN might be maybe a useful idea. Now, that's basically the only thing a VPN does. Yeah, so all the promises you hear that you have additional layers of security are not necessarily the case. At the end of the day, what you do is you shift information from your internet service provider to your VPN. Yeah, so your internet service provider knows what you do online in terms of so-called metadata. So this is top-level data, which means they don't know everything, but they know stuff like timings. So for instance, if you use YouTube, your internet service provider would know that you use YouTube and would know when you went in, when you go out. Yeah, so that information is stored, but not exactly what you do on the platform. Yeah, but that information is already useful and can be again used, against you potentially. Now, the thing about VPNs is a VPN has the same kind of knowledge. But of course, a VPN provider might sit in a different country and it might be more secure, you hope. The thing is, you never know. That's the honest opinion. Quite often, you have no idea who this VPN provider is. Yeah, whether this is actually a provider that has high levels of security or not, because data breaches can of course always occur, and your personal information might be exposed. So that's the main issue to have in mind. Of course, number one problem you always have is when you pay for VPN access, you always provide personal data. And you have to trust that your data is secure. Of course, there are some more private providers, but again, you have to really trust them, which I would not necessarily do. And I think that's important to note. So put differently, a VPN is not giving you an enormous amount of security. It shifts knowledge from your internet service provider to the VPN. This is basically what it is. It does not mean that your information is a lot more secure. Yeah, so you have to be careful here as well. I would not say that this is the only way and the best way to make your online appearance more secure. It's not. Good. I just want to stop here for a second. Are there any questions? Yeah, so I can imagine that sometimes your email accounts, in particular university email accounts, might be hacked. So that's quite possible, sadly. The main issue with that, so thanks Anna for that, is that you get into data breaches. For instance, in my case, I had a data breach. I used an online website to convert a file into PDF. Yeah, so there are many of these online websites. So I had to put in my email address to do this. And of course, this website stored my email address and also my IP address. This website got hacked, and now all of a sudden people have access to my email address and my IP address. Here you are, and you have a data breach. Yeah, so that's common. Whether it leads to more things, that always depends. Yeah, so that always depends in my case. Good. Any other question? Okay, good. So let me move into the biggest question here of this evening. What can you do about it, honestly speaking? Yeah, so of course there are these security threats out there. One answer is maybe we need more regulation. And there is, of course, at the moment in the UK, the discussion around the online safety bill. And to be honest, when you look at the proposal, you get, of course, all the information online. The intentions are good. Of course, you want to protect, in particular, young people. You want to protect people that are vulnerable. Absolutely. And then there are good reasons for that. The biggest challenge is, however, how you enforce rules and also whether it actually will make a big difference. Now, there are a few issues which are important to discuss. Number one issue is many definitions in the draft version of the bill are not necessarily very precise. Yes, I just put here one quote that platforms likely to be accessed by children will have duty to protect young people using their services from legal but harmful material. So this is an interesting one. And it has been discussed quite a bit in various formats. The issue here is, of course, what exactly is harmful? Who exactly will define what is harmful material? So that's tricky. Yeah, and of course, in particular now there is discussion about having very steep fines for any breaches of this bill. The problem there is what happens then to social media platforms. Do they take more risk, or do they try to minimize risk? And if they minimize risk, would this not lead to less information available online? So there are big debates here. It's not an easy one to discuss. And the main issue is, as always, how do you enforce these rules, and will it actually help? That's the last point. Because if you are really, really honest, I'm convinced that the intention is good, but I'm not entirely sure that it actually would do much. I don't think it will do much. The reason is you can always quite easily find ways around it. Yeah, so we already talked about VPNs. VPN is one example. So if you use a VPN, you might simply navigate yourself in terms of traffic to a different country virtually, and you might have access to the material you're looking for. So that's one issue. The other issue is, well, you might remove stuff on the main social media platforms, but usually this material is going somewhere. It doesn't just disappear. So what do you do about that? And of course, the big elephant in the room is what about the dark web? Yeah, so I don't really talk much about this in today's live stream, but honestly, it's not that hard to have access to the dark web. And then honestly, it's a lot worse than anything you find on the normal clear web, so to speak. So I'm not convinced it would do much. In my opinion, the most important thing is to actually provide education and to stress really the importance of education in that respect. Yeah, so that I think is much more important to make sure that we try to educate people as much as possible. Yeah, so whether this is at school, at university, or here online, try to put information out there, make people think about these things more carefully. And I think this is maybe, in any case, a good idea. Yeah, and in terms of safety, the best thing, in my opinion, is to have the tools, the education, to know that there is real danger out there, and to know in particular what are the signs that there are potential problems. Yeah? And we talked about, of course, the hacking issues and password safety, email account safety, and so on. And I think that's, in my view, a lot more important. Now, the final thing I want to stress is the power of data. Before I do that, let me just jump back for a second. You feel now scared. That I hope is not the case. Don't feel too scared about it. The thing is, it's always good to know. It's better, in my opinion, it's always better to know. Then at least you know what is going on. Okay, interesting point. There is, of course, honestly, Microsoft has done quite a lot to make things better. I'm from a very old generation, so my first operating system was, was it Windows 3.1, something like this? I can't remember. So back then we had a few more things in in terms of virus attacks. We had lots of more serious problems. So if you ask me honestly, has it improved since my days as a young programmer? Of course, that's, we talk about 30 years ago, and the answer is yes, definitely. So they're much more careful nowadays. And things certainly improved. There's absolutely no doubt whatsoever. Things have improved significantly. But I strongly suggest you have antivirus on your computer. The trouble is that, honestly, your computer nowadays on your laptop is most likely quite secure, because you have an operating system which you update on a regular basis. And number two, you tend to have antivirus software, which you, I think, should have. The problem is here, your mobile phone. Do you have on your mobile phone antivirus? The answer is, to be honest, most people don't. They don't. The next thing is, which people don't think about, if they assume, oh, I have a VPN on my computer, so I'm safe. What about your mobile phone? Yeah. Usually your mobile phone is also switched on and is using your home Wi-Fi. Is it using a VPN? The answer is most likely no. It still connects with your normal IP address. Yeah. It's very easy to bring the two together. Yeah. That's a problem. Yeah. So usually nowadays mobile phones are an issue. The other issue is anything linked to the internet. Yeah, we have all these gadgets which are linked to the internet, like your smart TV, your Fire Stick, and so on. There's so many gadgets nowadays which you link to the internet. Are they secure? Well, you hope, but you don't quite know, do you? What about your smart fridge? Who knows? What about your car? We had lots of issues with cars as well being hacked, and so on. So that's the next level. Yeah. So when you go into what you call Internet of Things, so IoT, different devices linked to your Wi-Fi, they pose a serious threat. Yeah. So my advice is definitely get an antivirus on your machine. I like Microsoft. Yeah. I'm not sponsored again. Okay. I use Windows a lot, but honestly, on my older laptops, I tend to use Linux. For many reasons, and also for me, in terms of security, it's better. It's less targeted because hardly anyone not too many people are using it, except you run a web server. Yeah, so I think that's the honest opinion. So the main risk, in particular for the younger generation, is mobile phones. And honestly, also, I don't always check my terms and conditions when I download a new app. You don't know. You can do a lot with it. I did a project which was funded by the European Commission on IoT and mobile phones. You can do a lot with it. You know so much about people. And very often, people don't realize what permissions they give to app providers. Yeah, so mobile phone apps are another big security risk. So here we are, I think. So just the thing is, you have to be always mindful and careful, and just have it in mind, and don't always blindly trust, in particular when people approach you and offer you some bizarre looking remote work experience. So that's unfortunately quite a common trick to get you into this terrible criminal relationship, so to speak. Good. Any other comments, questions? Good. Yeah, there might be a tiny bit of a time delay with comments, I realize. So today my streaming isn't the best. There are some time delays here and there. So I have to accept that. Yeah. Good. All right. Let me just move back into the data part, the power of data. All right. Now, the thing is, now, can you use it to your advantage? So obviously, we talked about cybercrime. It's a problem. We talked about financial crime, and of course, there are serious issues. We spoke about online safety. It's also an opportunity because now there is quite a significant job market around cybersecurity. So if you develop the right skills, I think it's an exciting opportunity to enter the market in cybersecurity or financial fraud prevention. And one way to do this is to focus on data. Yeah, so what you call nowadays data science is basically having the ability to collect data, to configure data, to wrangle with data, to restructure data, and then to effectively use it for model predictions. So nowadays you have many tools used in financial services to prevent fraud. So usually, if your credit card gets denied, if you are, if you're trying to buy something from a website you haven't used before, then it might be triggered by an algorithm. Yeah, so somewhere in your bank sits an algorithm which decides that this transaction is a high-risk transaction. It might block it. Yeah, so these systems are already in place, and I think they're getting more important going forward. Yeah, so if you want to go into this area, data science is one way. The other way, of course, is to go more into the cybersecurity area directly. And again, there are many different jobs in this field. And in particular, if you then look for something which is more closer to finance, banking, of course, the area of compliance is really important. Because also for financial institutions, the fines can be quite significant if they don't prevent fraud, for instance. They can be heavily fined. So they invest much more carefully in compliance, and there are quite a few jobs in this area as well. In my view, if you want to get into this, you sooner or later have to learn programming. Yeah, so that's, I would say, a must-have. In my view, again, of course, I'm a little bit biased. I love Python, but Python is the way. There's no way around it. I think Python is great. It's in particular very good to learn as a beginner. So if you haven't done any programming before, I think Python is the easiest one to pick up. The beauty of Python is it's used almost everywhere. Okay, so in data science, Python is definitely number one up there. Okay, there are other things you should also learn. We can talk about this, but Python is definitely number one. If you go into network cybersecurity, Python is quite important, but of course, it's not the only thing that is important. You have to learn about, I think, Kali Linux. You have to learn about virtual machines and so on. There's a lot more you have to learn, yes, but Python is quite powerful, and I use it quite a lot also in my cybersecurity course. So learn Python, learn something about data science. Honestly, for me, the starting point could be to learn for free. You don't always have to go into a paid course, or you don't have to really study data science. You can pick up a lot of stuff nowadays for free. So there is available for free, of course, the free code camp, which I highly recommend. It's great. On my own channel, you get some stuff on data science, on Python, on other programming languages, all for free. So there is actually no reason not to do it. And the beauty about programming in Python is, even if you don't really end up in data science or really in this area of software development or data engineering or whatever, even then it's useful, because it's getting quite important across various disciplines. So I think it's an opportunity out there for you to realize. Good, I stop my talking here and I get back to comments. Okay, is it okay to use pirated software? Well, the honest answer is not, of course, not really. First of all, you don't know whether it's secure. Okay, that's definitely would be one issue. Of course, you violate, of course, copyright. So the answer is no. And of course, I would never say it's a good idea. Honestly, you can develop your own. That's the fun parts. So I do that as well. So I quite like, doing my own little software project, which is pretty cool. But would I use pirated software? No, I wouldn't, because you never know where it's coming from. The main risk is a security risk as well. And even if you want to use more secure browsers, so one example is, of course, the Tor browser, and you find lots of guides on YouTube on that. Be careful here as well. You have to be careful. You always have to verify your downloads. And there are ways to do this. But don't just do it just by watching one YouTube video or so. So be careful here. There is an inbuilt firewall in Microsoft. Yes, absolutely. Yes, of course. And also the firewalls are certainly an awful lot better than in the old days. Would I say it's sufficient? I think, as I said, you're pretty secure on your laptops and on your computers, definitely. Much better than when I started 30 years ago. The main risks are quite often your mobile phone. Or the risk factors are things like, you get a text message, okay? And some of them are so good, they are so well made. For instance, there was one scam with NHS text messages linked to vaccinations. And basically the message read, and it came in the NHS colors. It looked like an NHS message, looked really perfect. So you click on it, and then it asks for standard stuff, your name, date of birth, and also your account details, because really you have to pay a little bit for your vaccination certificate. And of course, it was a scam. It looked completely authentic. Yeah, so that's a very common attack. Yeah, so these attacks where they basically clone websites, they can be very, very sophisticated and hard to spot. And this has happened many times, and that's a much more likely attack. So it's honestly, it's expensive to target one computer and just attack this computer. It's not usually how it works. Yeah. So quite often they try to do some phishing attacks, or they simply attack hundreds and thousands of machines at the same time and simply take the weakest link. Yeah, so it's not very common that someone is exactly targeting one particular machine. It's too much work, honestly. And you will see we have done some hacks, of course, in my courses where we of course tried these things, and once you get there, you see how much work it is. Yeah, so it's unlikely. So most attacks are quite random and still very successful. Yeah, because you try a few thousand and a few work out. Yeah, in particular, but what happens a lot is you find the name and the email address and maybe a password on a stolen, on some stolen data, and then you send thousands of emails to these people and try to extort money, and that's a very, very common attack. Good. Any other comments? Any other questions? If you have anything else, any other questions, just drop me a line. You find me, of course, on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, just by Googling my name, and I will try to get back to you. So today the live stream didn't start as well as I hoped. Yeah, so that's not perfect, but I'm getting there. Yeah, so hopefully, fingers crossed. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that. Any other comments, let me know. Of course, we have a bit of a time delay, so I might not see everything, and I will get back after the talk. I will then make this video available. I will maybe do a little bit of editing because I messed up the beginning. So let's see how that goes. Yeah. So I hope I see you again in future. I try to do a few live streams per year, not too many. I do mostly recorded videos because well, it's a lot easier, as you know, as you see. And you can anyway get in touch if there's anything I can help you with, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that, and this is much appreciated. And I'm working on the live streaming. It's a bit unnerving because you never know, and the Wi-Fi is sometimes a bit funny. It's yeah, it is what it is. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and I see you next time.